This episode of All About the Gear is brought to you by BorrowLenses.com, who also provided the equipment we're reviewing today.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of All About the Gear. My name is Frederick Van Johnson. I'm sitting here with my good friend, Mr. Doug K. Today we've got something pretty interesting to talk about. It's a camera that honestly I haven't considered as being in the running with these kind of big DSLR cameras, and I have a feeling that I'm going to be set straight today. So Doug K has in his hands the Samsung NX1 DSLR. So we're going to talk about that thing. Doug, you've had this. You've been running around San Francisco and teasing that you had it in your hands on social media.
Yep.
Well, first impressions of it before we get into the basics.
Well, and even before that, first of all, a little background into this thing.
Okay.
You know, we've had a lot of requests to do a show on the Samsung NX1, but we weren't able to get a hold of one for quite a while. Samsung wouldn't send us one,
right?
And so that was hard. And finally, our friends at Borrow Lenses got one in stock, and I said, well, I'm going to jump on that and get a hold of one. And this, as you said, this is a camera that, you know, you just don't normally think of. It's not, you know, it's not Nikon, Canon. It's not one of the four major mirrorless companies. So it just doesn't make it to our radar, except luckily we've had a bunch of listeners of All About the Gear who have said, hey, how about the NX1? So we finally decided to go for it here.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, this camera is a surprise.
In a good way or a bad way?
In a good way. This is, you know, Samsung doesn't have a great reputation for cameras.
Right.
There have been a number of models over the years, none of which I've used. I got to be honest here. I've never used a Samsung camera, but I didn't have high expectations for this. This camera pretty much blew me away. This is a major competitor in the APS-C, being the crop sensor market. It's a marvelous camera.
Okay. So now we have you foreshadowed the review. So now we want to dive into it and find out why you can make that statement. Talk about the basics of this thing first. What does it cost to get into it, and you know the configs and all that? Yeah, it's the body is $1,500, which makes it, you know, a little pricey in APS-C land, but pretty close to the middle. It's only $200 more with an inexpensive kit lens, which I don't have, but I hear is not too good. But there's an optional kit lens, which is a whopping $1,300 add-on, and I do have that lens. So that means it's a $2,800 starting point with a really good kit lens. That kit lens, by the way, it's a 16 to 50 millimeter. So what is that? That's about a 24 to 75 range. That's your normal lens, yeah. Yeah, normal lens. But catch this, it's an f2 to f2.8, so it's a really fast mid-range zoom. I mean, it's an f2 at wide open. And at $1,300, it better be tack sharp. It better be good, that's right. Yeah, it better be good. But the basic camera is pretty well priced. Here I'm showing the camera. This is with, just so it doesn't look ridiculous, this is the little 30 millimeter pancake lens, a lens I didn't particularly like, but it's a reasonable size. Let me swap that out, and for people watching the video, show you, if I can push the right button, put on that bigger kit lens. This is the 16 to 50, if I can find the red dots. And that's the $1,300 lens right there. Yeah, this is the $1,300 kit lens, the big one. Ooh, that's nice. I like the look of that. Yeah, it's nice looking. And the key things are here, first of all, let me give you the overview, where to start with this thing. Samsung has basically taken all the good ideas from all the good cameras out there and put them together. It's something that we often talk about. Why doesn't Nikon add this, or Sony add that, or Fuji, or Olympus, or Panasonic? These guys have taken almost every good idea out there and put it into a good camera. Controls are really nice. It's got, you know, first of all, the body, it's not a lightweight body. It's a mirrorless camera, but it's like a small DSLR. And of course, once you put these big lenses on it, it's going to feel like a DSLR anyway, right?
In fact, in the intro, Doug, I referred to it as a DSLR. I was thinking it was a DSLR.
Ah, no, this is a true mirrorless camera.
Okay.
So you're getting all the benefits of mirrorless, and as we've talked about, mirrorless isn't any longer really an issue of size and weight. It's really an issue of better technology, allowing us to do things that we can't do with a DSLR.
Yep.
Normal PASM dial, nice controls here. One funky button is this one here in the corner for ISO, autofocus, and so forth. These little buttons are a little bit hard to get to, especially with gloves on, but still not bad. But catch this. It has a tilt LCD, if I can tilt it, right?
Yep.
Tilts up, tilts down. It's a touch screen, a beautiful display. The quality on the screen is superb. Sort of normal controls on the back.
Yep.
All right.
Doug, just please tell me that thing doesn't have an audio in jack and that it doesn't shoot 4K.
I'm sorry, but it has an audio in jack and it shoots 4K. I hate to tell you.
Oh, man.
Right. And it has Wi-Fi, NFC, Bluetooth even. How often do you get a camera with Bluetooth?
What?
It has a good mobile app. I mean, and I got to tell you, the big part of this is the images are gorgeous. It's just a great quality camera. I never thought I'd be saying.
Where has this thing been hiding then? I mean, what Samsung marketing department? What are you doing?
Well, I think they're trying, and we certainly, we get the fanboys who come in and say, "Hey, you got to check out this camera. It's a great camera." And I went into it. I like to think I had an open mind when I started, but certainly I was convinced after shooting with it. But catch some of this other stuff that you can do with it. First of all, it shoots at 15 frames a second, making it way faster than the next. The closest is the 11 frames a second you get out of a Sony A6000.
Yes.
Say 15 frames a second with autofocus in between the frames. They claim a 70 frame buffer. I got 80 frames, 80 raw images in a burst, 15 frames per second burst. 80 raw files.
Holy wow.
Right? Now I was using a real fast SD card, and maybe it was faster than what they normally test these things with, but this thing just, here, I got to do this.
Yeah, I want to hear the machine gun. Little. Oh man.
15 frames a second.
You know what I see in my head when you do that? I see the pole vaulter jumping over the target there, the jump. Or the track star jumping, that's crazy.
It is great for that. It's a 28 megapixel sensor, meaning it's a little larger than any other APS-C camera out there that I could find. The closest being 24 is sort of the typical high end.
Yep.
Not that the difference between 24 and 28 is all that much, of course.
Sure. Yeah.
The sensor is what they call backside illuminated, and what that really means is they've moved the connections from the front of the sensor to the back of the sensor so that more of the area of the sensor is available to be photosensitive. That just means more light gets to the sensor, better low light, high ISO situation.
Interesting. What other cameras use that?
Sony has a bunch of them.
Okay.
I think some of the A7s are back illuminated. I think they were the leader in that, but there are a number of them out there now. Sony was the first time I ever heard about it. So this does pretty well in high ISO. I certainly shot it at 6400, even 12,800 looked pretty good to me.
Now, Doug, do you know who makes this sensor? Because how Sony makes the Nikon sensors and all that. So I wonder who makes this one.
I think Samsung makes it or farms it. I really don't think it's a Sony sensor, but okay. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Okay.
No low pass filter, so no anti-aliasing filter, so you get the full benefit of the sensor with no blurring to get rid of moire.
Nice. On that articulated LCD, right?
Yeah, and the EVF is really bright, really good. The LCD, like I say, it's tilt and touch, and it's really bright. And the user interface is one of the very best. I'm gonna sound like quite a fanboy here, which I guess I am.
I'm thinking you're gonna buy one of these things.
No, we'll get to that, but it has a user interface that it's very similar to what other cameras have, but Samsung, I guess because of their experience with phones, has made this actually a more usable and more intuitive interface than most other cameras
Very good.
that are out there. And just little things, but it's really, really nice.
Now, speaking of that interface on there, and I know we're going to get to the. Actually, I'll save my question until we get to we talk about the app and all that. So yeah, keep going.
Okay, so so the body, the camera, the controls, the viewfinder, the LCD, all that's pretty nice. We now have to move. We have to talk about the lenses.
Okay? Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So the optics, that lens that you had on there looked like it had a good heft to it, but we through this video we can't get a feel for how it, does it rattle when you shake it? Is the focus ring dampened? That kind of feel. What do you think?
Right. So the 16 to 50 pancake, the cheap kit lens, the one that only adds $200, I did not shoot with, as I mentioned. I did shoot with this 1650. Samsung has, I think it's a new series of lenses called the S series. You see there's an S here on the lens. Mm-hmm. And there are only 2 S series lenses. These are, I think you'd call them pro lenses on any other camera line. They're they're up there with the Nikon f2.8 zooms or the Canon f2.8 zooms. They're weather sealed, they're heavy, they're expensive, but these are very high quality lenses. So there are only 2 of them. There's this 16 to 50, which is that mid-range zoom.
Yep.
And then there's this other one that I shot with, which is gorgeous. This is a 50 to 150, which is close to a 70 to 200 that full frame users would be used to. This lens was spectacular. It is, how fast is that? It's an f2.8? Yeah, that's an f2.8. So again, very similar to a 70.
F2.8 constant all the way through the range?
All the way through, right.
So it's 2.8 at 150?
Yes. Right. So it's, well, that's similar to a Nikon or a Canon 200, right?
Yeah.
But it's smaller and lighter because it's only 150 instead of 200 millimeter, and that's the advantage of the smaller sensor.
Now, Doug, I know Samsung sent these over to you for you to test, or who sent
Borrow Lenses did.
Borrow Lenses sent these over for you to test. Now, when you look at these, when you look at the lineup, the Samsung lens lineup, how does it compare to, I know they're not going to be up there with a Nikon or a Canon, but say, how does it compare to the Sony offering?
Yeah, that's exactly the question here. It's actually weaker than Sony. Sony's, we used to tease Sony about having just pretty lousy lineup for their E-mount lenses.
Great lenses, but very few of them.
Right. So in the 2 years that we've been talking about these Sony E-mount cameras, they've really fleshed that out. So you now have a beautiful 16 to 35, you have a beautiful 70 to 200, you have a beautiful 24 to 70. So Sony's line, and plus a lot of prime lenses. Mm-hmm. So Sony's lens line is no longer a weakness. Samsung is still at the point where their lens line is weak. There are only these 2 pro lenses. That's a mid-range and a telephoto zoom. That's it. There are no pro-level primes, no pro-level wide-angle zoom yet. I got to believe they're coming, but that's it. And another thing is there are, I don't know, there probably are some third-party lenses for the NX mount. That's what this is called, is the NX mount. But I don't know of them. I have to admit I didn't dig into it deeply, but that's a challenge. So lenses are an issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, what about the lenses? The lenses that they do have, or at least the ones that you tested, when you looked at sort of the performance of them with the autofocus and face detection and all that stuff, did they stand up to the test compared to the other cameras you've tested?
Yeah, these S series lenses, again the expensive zooms, had excellent autofocus speed. The 30 millimeter pancake was awful. I mean, it was almost unusable. It was so slow to autofocus, so I would stay away from that one. But very good. So, on the autofocus overall, let me say this. The autofocus is good for action, I think, in continuous mode. In single shot mode, I found the August to hunt a little bit more than it should. It's really good in bright light, but once you got into even a slightly darker scene, the autofocus seemed to hunt more than it should. And we'll talk about the video in a minute, but in video mode, the autofocus really hunts around quite a bit, I found.
Okay, interesting. So, yeah, so so far, overall, a fantastic camera with a couple of rough edges, right? That's what.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
specifically, the lens department is still wanting for a wide enough selection.
Okay, which they can always grow into.
That's right. That's right.
No, what about manual focus? One of the things that we love about some of the other mirrorless cameras that we have are, the ability to have that focus peaking or a live display of what's in focus on the LCD or in the EVF. What about this guy? Does it support that?
Yeah, the manual focus on this camera is very nice for a couple of reasons. One is that it has excellent focus peaking, but also this touch to focus thing that we see on many other cameras, particularly all the mirrorless guys.
Mm-hmm.
That is excellent here. Really works well. It's easy to select a focus point and it goes right into it. Really nice. The only thing is that on this camera, let me show you something here. We can switch back to this guy. That focusing this lens in manual focus, you got to crank this thing around it's a zoom. You have to crank it quite a bit. So you actually, to go from one end of the focus range to the other, you have to rack this more than 360 degrees, and I found that a little disturbing with this.
That sounds like it's designed for the video guys because they have that extra long throw to get those smooth.
Yeah, but to have it go more than 360 degrees is trouble, because if you put a gear on it and you try and mark the thing.
Yeah.
The bigger zoom lens though is much better. It doesn't go through more than 360 degrees. It's much easier for manual focusing.
Okay.
So that 50 to 150 was great.
Well, so speaking of video,
Yeah.
if you
Speaking of video,
if you look at it from that standpoint, some of the other guys in that video arena, because you mentioned that it shoots 4K, would be the Panasonic guys with the GH4, right, and Sony with the A7S, but with a breakout box on there to actually create the video or to write the video to. But what about this guy? Is it a contender in that camp?
I don't think it's quite there, primarily because of the lens selection. I mean, if you want really good quality in video, you need a good quality lens, just like you do in still photography. Mm-hmm. And I think a mid-range zoom and a telephoto zoom probably isn't enough for video, even though those are pretty fast lenses. Mm-hmm. So I think it's not quite there yet. Let's say the 4K video, first of all, it's 24 frames a second only, so you can't do any slow-mo in 4K. The strangest thing that they've done in this camera, and I understand why they did it, they've gone to a new codec called Hevc, which is the high efficiency video codec, mm-hmm. H.265. It's the wave of the future. It's got much more efficient compression than H.264, but none of the video editing software is compatible with it yet that I know.
Well, that's a problem.
That's a problem. So what it means is when you take the video off of this thing, you have to transcode it to ProRes or some other H.264 format before you can edit it. And you can go have a cup of coffee while you do that, or an entire meal, but that's a temporary problem, because certainly the video apps will eventually be able to handle H.265.
Yeah. Any other things that make it a viable
the
camera?
video stream output is only 40 megabits per second, which is pretty low. Yeah. Now you get the advantage of the better codec in terms of better quality there, but it's still not quite the bit rate that's going to give you the same quality as the GH4 or the A7S, the Alpha 7S. So I didn't have a chance to do a direct comparison, but I think I would not expect the video quality to be quite as good out of this one. At 1080p, it will shoot 120 frames a second, which is nice.
So the multimediographer, filmmaker person that's looking to get a multi-purpose camera to shoot video and stills and make short films and do landscapes and all that with, is this a viable option, or should they be looking at the GH4 or the Sony A7S?
I think unless you need the very best in 4K, I think this is perfectly viable camera.
You see, that statement is suspect, right? Because I'm like, I want the very best of everything, of course, right? So why would you buy something that isn't the very best if you have the option?
You're going to get, in this camera, you're going to get an extraordinary still camera and a very competent video camera.
Okay.
But the GH4, is let's compare it to the GH4. I mean, the GH4 has probably better video quality,
Mm-hmm.
But because the sensor is smaller, I think this has better image quality, and I think this has, as I said, I think this has got a still image quality that's up there at the very top of the APS-C level, and APS-C is almost inherently better quality than Micro Four Thirds.
Yeah, well, just
I know.
because
Oh boy! Oh, I hear the hate mail coming in already.
I was going to say, address your mail to. Yeah, yeah. So I could debate that as well. Actually, I couldn't debate that because I don't. I mean, I'm shooting.
You don't have an APS-C camera.
I don't, and I find the the Micro Four Thirds perfectly acceptable, but I haven't done a taste test, between the two. So, okay. So what about connectivity options? For this thing, you mentioned that it has a great app. What makes it great?
It's, again, they've taken the sort of the best of breed from everything they can find.
Yeah.
They have a really nice app. I used it on iOS on an iPhone 6, and it has all the remote control functions. Even touch focus you can do on the remote app. So it's got everything right there. And they have, like I say, Wi-Fi, NFC, and Bluetooth. I don't know why the Bluetooth is in there. I don't know when Bluetooth is used, but somebody suggested when I was reading some other comments online that it might come into play when you're using NFC on Android. It might be using an NFC Bluetooth connection instead of Wi-Fi. I don't know.
For remote triggering or something like that.
Something. I'm not sure what. But the app is very nice, very well done.
Nice, and it works great with the iPhone. Of course, you tested.
Yeah, it was great, marvelous. I mean, it was again, I would say it's up there with Panasonic Lumix, which I think has some of the best apps. It's at least that good. Very, very usable.
Okay.
Very little lag in the image, which is sort of nice. So one of the problems of these apps when you're trying to run the camera remotely is that as you pan the camera or zoom the camera, there's a lag in the image on the mobile device.
Yeah.
And in this case, that lag was relatively small.
Very cool. I really want to play with this thing. All right, so it comes down to we're closing in on the finish line, and that's jumping in the ring. Ding, ding. Who's in the ring with this guy? Who's the competition?
Oh, man, sometimes these are easy, and sometimes these are hard. I think the primary way to view this camera, at least the way I'm looking at it, is what do I compare this to in terms of other crop sensor cameras? Those are cameras with sensors that are smaller than full frame but larger than Micro Four Thirds. So let's run down a couple. There are two Canons in there. There's the 7D Mark II, which costs $200 more, or there's the 70D, which costs $200 less. Personally, I think this camera blows them both away.
Wow.
In terms of quality, I think the image quality is superior to both of the Canons. I think the 7D Mark II is probably a somewhat better built camera, although I can't really fault this thing. The whole thing is, somewhat weatherproof, weather resistant, let's call it.
Okay, I was going to ask you that because the 7D is weather sealed, right? And it can you take this one to a desert or wet environment and still get the shot?
Yeah, I think this has probably the same degree of weather sealing if you use the S series lenses. If you use the non-S lenses, they probably have no weather sealing in them. Is my impression, I should say. Both the 7D, the 7D Mark II has both of them, 70 and the 70D have Canon's great dual pixel autofocus, but so I think they might autofocus slightly better than these, but the 7D shoots 10 frames a second, the 70D shoots 7 frames a second, this guy does 15, so if that's important to you, this will be a winning camera.
Yeah.
Maybe the best competitor, quality-wise, I think might be the Nikon D7200. Now, we haven't tested one yet because it's a new camera. We've tested the 7100, but assuming this is up there, in the D7100 quality, I think the 7200 might be not a slightly better camera, but as good as this camera. $200 less than this, 24 megapixels, only 6 frames a second. So,
and again, this one was how many frames a second? Did you say it was 15? Okay.
So you've got, and again, that's only important to probably a small number of our listeners, but for those who care, it does matter. So I think those are the primary head-to-head competitors. 2 Canons, 1 Nikon. Of course, those are both DSLRs, not mirrorless cameras. And that means that those cameras are lacking in a lot of the features that you get from these things, because remember, a mirrorless camera is as though you had a DSLR that was always shooting in live view mode.
Mm-hmm.
And in a DSLR, when you use live view, you're sort of a stepchild, right?
Yeah.
You don't feel like you're using all the features of the camera. You feel
it's like hacking it, because it's like I wasn't designed to do that, but I'm gonna lift my mirror for a second to allow you to see it, right?
That's right. And then it has to go through the whole thing. It has to, basically to take the picture, it has to put the mirror back down, open the shutter, close the shutter, put the mirror back up. I mean, it has to go through a whole bunch of stuff.
Vibration. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So, in the case of a mirrorless, there's so many more things that you can do when the camera's designed for that mode. Now, there's one other camera that we talk about a lot on this show that I need to mention. That's the Sony Alpha 6000.
And you own that one, don't you?
I do. So I have a prejudice, but this camera is almost $1,000 cheaper than this Samsung. It's $550 right now.
People love that A6000, man. I mean,
look at all the people who gave it Camera of the Year last year.
Yeah.
A lot of people decided that was Camera of the Year, including me.
Yeah.
And it's a 24 megapixel camera. It has autofocus that's better than this one. It's 11 frames a second, but it doesn't have a number of the features that the Samsung camera has. It has a tilt screen, but no touch.
Yep.
A lot of other things. And to be honest, I think this NX1 has a better image quality than my favorite Sony Alpha 6000. This is the best APS-C image quality I've ever seen.
You know what's crazy though, Doug? We're in early 2015 right now. What's that Sony A6100 gonna look like? When they
I think it's going to be the A7000, and I'm expecting it within the next couple of months.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
If they put a touchscreen on that, I'll buy one. I'm gonna buy it.
Sony doesn't believe in that stuff. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Sony.
Right.
Okay. So what are the other?
The only other thing you can consider, because this camera is such high quality, you might want to compare it to some of the full frame cameras, which of course means you've got to bump up your budget for lenses because you need more expensive lenses. But that would include something like the Nikon D610, which is the same price as this. The Sony A7 original one is $1,300. Yeah. The new A7 II is $200 more than this at $1,700.
Right.
So again, the Nikon 610, the Sony A7, and the A7 II are potential competitors, although it's not really apples to apples because those are full-frame cameras.
Yeah. And which one of those Sonys do you own?
No, none of them.
Oh, you just the A6000 right now?
I sold my A7. I'm not going to buy an A7 II. I own an A7S, which is the high ISO, and an A7R, which is the high megapixel camera.
The 36 megapixel beast.
Yeah, those are the two I have.
Come on, which one?
What? Oh, I didn't hear your question.
Oh, I said, which one do you use the most? And then there was the pause for emphasis.
Right. No, the A7S is my go-to camera.
That is, okay.
Yeah, the A7R for me is still a tripod landscape camera, which I never use except when I go to things like Iceland or with Martin Bailey.
Yeah. I sure would like to get the A7. I'm thinking about, getting one of the A7Ss, but probably wait until they rev it and get to the A7S2 or something.
Yeah, the A7S2 will likely have the in-body image stabilization added to that, and that will be a killer camera.
Yeah. That's when I want to start experimenting with those guys. Yeah. So many cameras to play with. It's so fun.
So many cameras, so little time.
So little time, yeah. But luckily, these cameras capture time.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
All right. So bottom line for this, Mr. Doug K. Who's this camera for? It sounds like it's coming in. We saw the competition, but it sounds like it's, it's a pro camera, but it's got a foot in the consumer side too.
Yeah, if you look at it objectively, I mean, this is a great camera, certainly for anybody who's doing action, sports, nature photography, because of the high frame rate and the pretty good continuous autofocus that they have. It is a great general purpose camera for anybody who wants a camera that will basically do everything from action to pretty good in low light to video. It does excellent stills in the normal mode and good enough in everything else. But having said that, so why isn't Doug going out and buying one, other than the fact that Doug has like
Ask that. I know. I love you knew I was going to say that.
And I just got another camera we'll talk about. But
The reason is that you have to, something comes out like this, it's very impressive, but you have to look at the Samsung infrastructure question. Where are they in terms of lenses? What's the company's commitment to staying in the camera business? There's just not enough history there for me to want to to divest myself of all my other cameras to jump ship to this product line. Now, having said that, I did that pretty early in the Sony Alpha days, but that was for some different reasons. Here, I think I would personally just be more conservative before I would jump ship. If I didn't own a camera, if I wasn't too concerned about the expandability of it, if I just wanted a couple of good lenses and a camera that would really do a great job, I'd probably spend some money on this.
So it's a good. So it would be a good, if like you were saying, you're transitioning from a point and shoot or your iPhone photography, and you're like, okay, I want to take this stuff more seriously, and you're that person that's looking at Canon, Nikon, Panasonic, Olympus, Fuji. They should add Samsung to that list.
Yeah, and here's the thing about this. Okay, it is let's call it a travel camera, right? Talk about travel lenses, for example. This is except for the fact that you don't have that 10x or 11x zoom that you really want for travel, this mid-range 16 to 50 is pretty nice. So you have a great general purpose, go out and do almost anything kind of camera. However, because these lenses are big and heavy, the body is, as we said, more like a DSLR, you're not getting the benefits of size that you might get particularly from Micro Four Thirds. So if you want this quality that I've been raving about, you need to go with the big lenses, and that means you're going big.
Right.
And if that's not a problem for you, this could be a great camera. If you want to be more compact and more nimble, as Derek Story would say, this is not a nimble camera because the good quality lenses are large and the body is sort of a medium-sized body.
Love it.
Did I just make that more complicated for everyone?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I wanted a binary answer. You gave me the square root of pi. So.
Well, the problem is I'm very impressed with the camera, but I'm happy to send it back, and I'm not going to buy one. But you can't buy everything, right?
Right, but it's awesome. But yeah, the bottom line is it should be on the list.
I think so.
Whereas before you would not have considered this when you are putting it on the list in terms of the big heavyweights in the industry.
And one more caveat: you have to come back and look at the price, and that is that it's nice that it's a $1,500 camera, but if you want a really good medium focal length zoom, you got to spend $2,800 to get it with that one lens. So this at that point it's no longer an inexpensive camera.
Yeah. Hey, did Gordon Lang do a deep dive into this camera over on Camera Labs?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, we have to check that out. Yeah.
I'll have to check. I don't know if Gordon's reviewed this one or not.
Yeah, I'm going to dive into that because he gets into the DNA level of these things.
He sure does. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he goes very
pixels is this much.
Right. Well, the best thing about Gordon is that he does he posts sample images and compares this to that and so forth. So it's very nice.
Video and all that. Yeah. Right. Yeah, he does sample video so you can see what it looks like. Cool. All right. So what's next on your list of things to review?
All right. Are you ready for this?
Not really, but go ahead anyway.
Okay.
What film? Look at that Tri-X 400. Look at that. 400.
And what goes with film?
A SLR without the D. Oh, a Leica M6. Ooh, look at that. That's like a BMW 3 Series in terms of what that thing costs, right?
Well, I'll tell you, the reason I got into the Sony A7s was primarily so that I could use some of these great M-mount lenses made by Leica, Zeiss, and Voigtlander. That's really the main reason I got started with the Sonys.
Yeah.
So, I went through the whole A7 series, and I've enjoyed them. I shoot with them all the time, except when I'm working on the show, of course.
Yeah.
And then I said, I've got all these beautiful M-mount lenses. I could go out and buy a used film body and shoot film. I haven't done that for like 20 years. Seriously, because there was a period where I stopped shooting altogether,
and didn't own a camera. My wife had a point and shoot, and that was it. So
Wow.
I went online and bought a used Leica M6 from Japan. It arrived. It's beautiful, and I have started shooting film.
Wow. Heresy.
It is, isn't it? So the next show we're going to do is actually, what's it like to go back to film?
Oh, I can't wait for that. You know, it's funny you say that. In the most recent episode of This Week in Photo, as we record this, that would be episode number 405, Valerie Jardin was on there, and she was telling me that there is this massive movement of people that are moving back into film. And it's funny, just a day later, you and I are talking, and you just took delivery of a film camera.
That's funny, because Valerie and I have never communicated about that topic.
Yeah.
And of course, that episode of TWiP will air before this one does.
Yeah.
So if you haven't listened to it, go back. I will. I'm going to go listen to it too, but I have no idea what you guys said. But it's I don't have a lot to tell you yet. I haven't shot a lot yet. I haven't processed a lot yet. But we're going to talk about what's it like to go back to film after all these years, and why someone might want to do that, and what's it like for a guy who's totally into digital at this point. How do you go back that way?
I know, that's like going to a horse and buggy now, from after you've been driving your Prius for a while. Interesting.
I've got a camera here that the only thing electrical happens to be a light meter. So this is just a mechanical gadget. Even the rangefinder, the viewfinder is a mechanical marvel the way they do it in this camera.
So after the EMP hits and none of our electronics work, Doug can still be out there taking photos. Right?
Yeah, who knows what the EMP does to the film though? Probably fog my film. I don't know. Anyway, but it's going to be it's not going to be a camera review. It's going to be more about this is what shooting film is like, and what did I learn from that process.
I can't wait for that. Yeah, I have questions percolating already, because I want to know where you're going to get that film processed. Are you going to do it yourself? Where do you buy that from? Yeah, where do you buy it, and the whole 9 yards?
Yeah,
and
so
how much does it cost? Yeah,
I've been shooting some Ilford HP5. I've been shooting some color. Got all sorts of stuff to talk about. So
go find some Panatomic X. You remember that?
Yeah, you can't find Pan X.
I love that.
There are that was ASA 25, as I remember.
Yes, yeah, long exposure stuff.
Yeah, no Pan X, no Kodachrome. Those are all gone.
Oh, God, those were the days.
Yep.
Oh well, we have digital.
Yep.
All right. Well, cool, man. I guess that's it for this episode of All About the Gear. I think we covered the Samsung NX1 pretty well. I feel like I understand what it is, who it's for, what it isn't, and where it might go, and some of the limitations, obviously, with the lens lineup and the video codec and all that stuff. So,
and I
very good job.
This is another case, again, not just because they help us with the show, but this is a case where if this is a camera that interests you, if you really want this high-quality APS-C stuff, you need to rent this camera, because it's full of surprises, and this is not a camera that I would run out and buy without playing with first. So
absolutely. Perfect. Yeah, perfect case for using Borrow Lenses, who sent this over. Thank you, Borrow Lenses. Yeah, it's a perfect case for try before you buy. I wish and you can rent cars. Like, I wish you could do this with cars.
Right.
Like this brand new car shows up on the market, and you're not sure if you want it yet. Go rent it for a week, and then if you don't want it, turn it back in. They don't have that yet. You usually get rental cars that are, at least a year old or something. I wish they had this for every market out there. So kudos to Borrow Lenses for cracking that nut.
Very good. All right, thanks, Frederick.
Yeah, thanks, man. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next review.
Next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, see you later.